As if racking up 22 turnovers leading to 32 points for the Oklahoma City Thunder wasn't bad enough, the Pacers also seemed to take a bad turn with Tyrese Haliburton, who finished with postseason lows in both shots per touch and drives per 100 possessions, as he was deployed mainly as a decoy while struggling to turn the corner. All the while, whereas the starting backcourt for the Pacers grappled with maneuvering downhill against pressure, OKC stars conversely leveraged the pressure of the opposition into innumerable downhill maneuvers. In the end, although TJ McConnell and Pascal Siakam both managed to remove the seal on the paint in the second half, moving the Pacers to within striking distance with moves and counter moves before they were both moved to the bench for what became a disastrous period of rest in their stead, it wasn't enough to avoid going down 3-2 in the series, returning to Gainbridge Fieldhouse in desperate need of turning the page on all the turns and non-turns for the worst. Here to discuss Game 5, what changed, what may still need to change in Game 6 is my longtime co-host, my favorite basketball writer, my favorite basketball talker, Samson Folk.
Yeah, I guess the first thing I would say, and probably the most important thing to say, is that if people haven't been paying attention, it was announced that Tyrese has a calf strain. That obviously had a very outsized impact on his performance. We've critiqued him in the past, and myself more than you, just because of, I think you've always had a better eye for his play style than I do, and he is counter to so many things that I like. But this game, I find it very hard to lob any criticisms at him. The same way you and I were very light on criticizing Darius Garland, who it turned out his foot was much worse and had to get surgery. A calf strain is no joke, especially trying to beat this Oklahoma City defense. It isn't, even when you're a decoy, even when you're a spot-up shooter, it's just pressure comes and puts stress on that. So I don't know exactly how it shakes out for Game 6. I tweeted this out. Tyrese, and as you know, has clearly played through many things and always plays through stuff. So just based on that, I assume he'll suit up. But he's not going to be at his best. There's just no way to be at your best. That's tough. And for as good as this series has been, I really hope that they're able to take this thing to the bitter end with all of this, all of this taken and accounted for. But it got what was already required like a Herculean effort, or the David versus Goliath. This is like David doesn't have the slingshot anymore. It's tough. It's very tough.
Your tweet was a lot more thoughtful than mine, because mine was simply ban calf muscles and that they're useless. So Tyrese's postseason run did get cut short last year, obviously, as well, while he was dealing with the hamstring injury over the final two games against the Celtics in the Eastern Conference Finals. So we'll see whether he's able to go or not. I know there's not going to be any results from the MRI yet today. So if you're listening to this tomorrow and this seems like somewhat dated, I do apologize for that, but I can't predict the future of what the MRI machine's going to say. We are going to look
predict the future in Game 5, and I was just wrong, so we're just as apt to be right as we are wrong. Maybe even more so the latter than the former.
Well, you have been the Pacers oracle a lot of times throughout this run, so I think we can allow you some leeway to be wrong every once in a while. But we are going to look about a little bit at what Tyrese was dealing with in this game while keeping what we now know as far as a calf strain in mind while we're looking at the film, and with what OKC was doing, because I think a lot of things were pretty telling as far as people probably should have been able to notice that he was going through it while we were watching this. But this is a play where, if you've been following along with this podcast throughout all 4 rounds of the playoffs, you'll probably remember it. Sideline out of bounds play. When the ball goes out near the corner, the Pacers almost unilaterally call line. You'll watch Rick Carlisle and he'll be like, line. So what they're looking for is Tyrese is going to, come out here. He's supposed to get the pass right there. Andrew's supposed to be passing it to Tyrese. And then after he makes that pass, he would run across screens from Miles and Obi, effectively just clearing out of the way. And once Tyrese has the ball, Obi would then cut back toward the sideline off of Miles just to hit a quick 3 off the pop. They don't even get the ball to Tyrese because Lou Dort's basically pushing him back towards half court. The play's broken. Tyrese has to come back to the ball. He's automatically getting off of it again. A lot of, basically throwing it around, not getting into anything with any type of flow until Andrew has to take a grenade. Sidestep 3. just to explain the coverage and how disruptive that is for the Thunder to be doing, here is that exact same sideline out of bounds play, although you'll notice that the Pacers made a tweak, and very rarely do you see Tyrese as the inbound passer on sideline out of bounds plays, and yet there he is doing it so that when he passes it to TJ, look how clean the pass is to TJ versus what was just happening from Tyrese against Lu Dort. Nobody's pushing TJ back towards half court, so then Tyrese can naturally, though he takes a little bit of contact there, can run across those screens, and now they're getting the exact shot that they wanted to get for Obi before. So that should be able to provide a before and after instruction on how disruptive the coverage that Tyrese is seeing is being to the Pacers offense overall and the types of tweaks they're having to make. Then just from him, from a physical standpoint, little things that I watch for that you can usually tell something isn't quite right here. Immediately, he's pointing for Andrew to bring the ball up. He doesn't even want to get it because Cason Wallace is doing, he's kind of running parallel to him. That's not intense pressure, but he didn't want to have to shed the pressure as the ball handler. And then you can tell that he's just trying to push, screen his own man into Pascal, and Andrew tries to get downhill. Luckily, they do score out of that. But watching some of how Tyrese is reacting to this is somewhat telling here. Just automatically bailing out after the missed free throw. And this was when I knew in the first half, like, something is not right here because Pascal's the bring up ball handler. In this game, I think he had 11 possessions as the bring-up ball handler, which would be tied for like the fourth most in any game this entire season. He's bringing it up, and then watch Tyrese here. Both hands on the knees in the corner, forcing Pascal to be the initiator. And then as soon as Pascal gets off the ball, he's just running off a stagger. Pretty soon you're not even going to be able to see Tyrese in this play. Clear, completely out of frame, and they're trying to play 4-on-4. A lot of this game, it was like Tyrese was just like, you know what? I'm going to push through what I'm dealing with physically simply so that I can be a decoy and provide more spacing for the other four people on the court. Because is that a plane where you are?
That's thunder.
Oh.
You can keep, it's about to storm.
Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah, so sorry. Tyrese is getting, no, I was just like, what's happening?
This is an ominous, this is an omen.
Similar. Yeah, the Thunder rolled over the Pacers too. So Tyrese just going back to half court again. Siakam having to carry a pretty heavy load because of this, both as a ball handler, a driver. I mean, a lot in the half court where they're just using him to create space. Sideline out of bounds counter pressure against Tyrese again, where this was a play. If you watched game one, you should remember it because Samson and I talked about it in terms of they tried to go to this exact same sideline out of bounds play. It was not as effective as what we're going to see here when Tyrese runs off this stagger. And Lu Dort is now standing next to him on the logo. Siakam has a lot more space to be operating, to be able to get to the rim with his left.
He was unbelievable.
Tremendous to start the fourth quarter, which we'll look at a little bit more. But just as a compare and contrast to game one, like, note the difference of the space Siakam just had to work with when Tyrese came up off of that stagger versus when they run that exact same action in game one and it's TJ McConnell and they don't even follow him off the picks. Yeah, and then Hartenstein's off of him again until Ben then has to create at the end of the clock. Like, you're seeing a pretty big difference there where Tyrese was still, despite how limited he was, despite how many turnovers he and Andrew Nembhard had, I can kind of understand from his perspective, like, it is the finals, and from the Pacers' perspective, that it's somewhat like when Damian Lillard last year in the playoffs against the Pacers was like, I just wanted to be out there to help Chris Middleton because I knew that there would be attention paid to me. There was still definitely attention being paid to Tyrese in the second half and in the fourth quarter that helped some of what Siakam was having to do just by virtue of him standing on the court, despite the fact that you could tell in a lot of situations that, he wasn't himself. Just like right there, like, he has a closeout from Chet Holmgren, tons of room to space or to shoot, the defense in rotation, and he just was automatically, he's basically just a filter for touches where he's just a ball mover or he's just standing to try to create maximum 4-on-4 room for the other people that are out there. So I don't know what other thoughts you had about Tyrese. I just kind of wanted to show some of those, like, this is how they were having to maneuver him around, because certainly the Thunder deserve credit for the way that they were guarding him, and I don't want to take that away from them. But their mannerisms here from Tyrese, where you can tell this is not a person who is 100% and feeling right in their body. And also that there was still some latent benefit to him being out there, despite the fact that he clearly did not play well.
Yeah, I'm going to take the opportunity. Usually you do this, but I'm going to read the numbers this time. So 0.089 shots per touch. That is the third fewest of any game this season. It is only behind the loss to Portland and the December loss to OKC. And 8.451 drives per 100 possessions, his lowest drive rate of the postseason. So I'm actually excited to move past the Tyrese stuff because we're just watching an injured player struggle, quite frankly. And if any game, the Pacers podcast that we do deserve to spend a good chunk of time looking at the opponents, Shea and J-Dub were sublime, and they deserve. And I hope we go there. But Tyrese, I don't know, like Tyrese, I've been such a huge fan. He's been unbelievable in these playoffs. This sucks. And it's just if anyone has some kind of like smoke for his performance, I don't get that. It makes zero sense to me. We're just watching a guy grit it out. It's tough.
We will look at stuff from J-Dub and Shea. First, however, though, I think it is somewhat of an interesting basketball philosophical compare and contrast between the two teams and how they're pressuring each other that I thought might be worth it to look at, especially for maybe tweak possibilities for the Pacers in Game 6. So something that I noticed from the Thunder, and that I think that when you and Lewis and I did one of these podcasts last year in the playoff run when they played the Bucks, that we talked about, like, should more teams be going under more often than they are on picks? And I brought up the fact that Lou Dort does this a lot. The Thunder, which I'm going to be interested to get your thoughts given the number that I gave you. The Thunder go under more picks per 100 possessions this season, including the playoffs, than every team except for your Toronto Raptors.
Yes.
So your thoughts on how often the Toronto Raptors are going under, and just going under as a concept in general? Like, who's going under so much for the Raptors, and for what reason?
Everyone. And also, like, they have quick guards, and they have guys like Jamal Shed, Davion Mitchell for a third, probably a half of the season. They also have, like, Emmanuel Quickley. They had two-way guards. They had a lot of guys who had energy for that. And they also, keep in mind, spend a lot of time guarding at the point of attack with Scotty Barnes and Jonathan Mobo. These are guys who love to duck under and pop out, and they have the length to be able to do so. With guards like Nembhard and Nesmith being the best at pressuring, like if Pascal did more pressure, then I think we'd see more unders for the record. But when you have guys like Nembhard and Nesmith who are so good at skirting around screens or like stepping in, creating the angle and maintaining contact, that it makes you go a different way just based on who your personnel is. But the Raptors, their personnel dictated that, and they were one of the highest pickup point teams in the NBA. I covered the Pacers with you last year as they did this in their run to the Eastern Conference Finals. Watched it with however many teams in the playoffs last year, and then watched the NBA at large ante it up. So every time an opposing coach came into Scotiabank Arena, I would talk to them about pickup points. And Chauncey Billups and the Trailblazers were one of the early, trailblazers of this in the league. And he basically said it stems from what he wanted as a point guard himself. And it stemmed from that he had a really young team. He's like, I, as a guard, hate being pressured, and we have lots of energy to spare, so let's expend it. And the Raptors, they expend it. They want those high pickup points, but they also, Darko is a pretty futuristic coach. I'm sure he's looked at something in the macro of like going under equals et cetera, and they're very comfortable with it. And the Raptors actually outperformed, I think, their defensive talent by some measure. They ended up in the top half this season after struggling for so long. So something was working there, although it's not playoff level basketball. But yeah, there's merit to going under screens.
And I wouldn't necessarily say, I don't even know if there's a correlation, let alone a causation, but everything that you just pointed out there tends to lead me to think, and especially with which defenders are going under the most in a lot of situations, that the pressure is leading to going under more often because the counter for the ball pressure is setting higher screens. And the further the screens are from the basket, the more incentive you have to just duck under them and get to the other side. In addition to things like you just said, like, a guy like Jaden McDaniels is very, very good at being able to duck under and still surge out. And that's a very valuable skill in today's NBA when you can take away the drive and you can potentially take away the pull-up three as well. So the Thunder, when they're seeing some of these higher ball screens to clear Lou Dort's just going under again. There he finally goes over when it's closer to the 3-point line. But as you'll notice, Tyrese never got a foot in the paint while he was going under and going under and going under. And now the ball is kind of pinging around the perimeter, which obviously they're back into their half-court offense. But there you'll see he's getting ready to dunk under the one from Aaron. He ducks under the next one from Aaron. To Tyrese's credit, he uses a little bit of burst there and actually rejects it to get Lou Dort off of balance. And then he probably could have taken a layup there if he was feeling a little bit better in his body than what he was last night, but ends up generating a 3 for Miles. But when you're watching the Thunder's pressure, they're going under a lot, and the Pacers are going under pretty much never. Like, these are 3/4 court screens, and Benedict Mathurin's going over both sides. Tony Bradley not really providing much in support up at the level if they're going to be playing the big that high from the basket, in addition to sending the person over. Similar here for Miles, where he's not providing much of an edge, and then I don't really know why he's retreating from providing the support quite as quickly as he is. But Shea had a number of assists on 3-pointers out of after not recording assists, which, like, that didn't mean a lot to me in the prior game, because that was an indicator somewhat of the Thunder shooting the ball as poorly as they did. The Pacers weren't really going over under it. And in this situation, it's okay, because Pascal is more capable than Tony Bradley and Miles Turner to just out and out switch if Andrew doesn't get over the top and be able to still stay in front and provide a contest. That isn't the case.
By the way.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
And here, like, he used a spin move to be able to reject against Andrew, and then he's getting fouled again. Like, it's just like over and over, where it's giving them a head of steam to be able to get into the paint, because they continue to go over on the screens that are that far from the basket. And that's not solely the only reason why, but it is a contributing factor. And I still wonder if at a certain point in time, so much of the Pacers' identity is dictated on both ends of the floor by their pressure. Their ability to score allows them to set their pressure. The fact that they're applying pressure means that there's not as much pressure on them in the half court to always get stops. That's been the case for them for quite some time, but I'm just kind of wondering what they'll do in Game 6, depending upon what Tyrese's status is. But another place where the under came into play, we talked about this as an adjustment from the Knicks in Game 5, where, you know, when Tyrese is being face guarded, they put OG onto Andrew Nembhard, and they ducked under multiple picks with OG against Nembhard and kind of dared him to be a pull-up shooter. And that led to some not great shots going back to Gamebridge that the Pacers had to make adjustments for whenever they ultimately won the Eastern Conference Finals. The Thunder basically mimicked the same strategy. Like, you can see Shea ducking under against Andrew, whereas Cason Wallace is denying the pass back to Tyrese. This is what led to some of the turnovers in the fourth quarter. I don't know what you thought about that now that we're seeing it again, what you would hope from Andrew in those situations. Like, Shea's not the same as OG in the sense that OG was New York's strongest defender, being the person who was guarding Nembhard, but similar tactic-wise in the half court of how the two starting guards for the Pacers, who combined for, you know, not a lot of production in this game, were being defended there if you want to see it again.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind it. Generally, I think Andrew, there's a reason the Pacers trust him so much. There's a reason they will automatic into, like, this is an Andrew possession. This is what it looks like. But it's pretty clear in this game, and it's not an excuse. Everybody gets fatigued, and actually fatigue and how resilient J-Dub and Shea have been to their own fatigue, I think, is a really important factor in this series, and why the Pacers have not been able to impress their style as much as they want. But Andrew was tired. Like, on that pitch, with the slot pitch to Pascal, it's just tired. Just, like, wants to get off the ball, just, like, wants to take a breather. And, like, here too, it's like he and Tyrese, even before he got injured, like, in this series, it's that fatigue kind of sets in. Like, you kill the dribble a little bit too early, a little bit too often, you know. And Andrew, he started doing that too. And killing your dribble against this team, especially above the break, especially near the sideline, is death. In fact, like, when you run the Knicks defense back, and think about how frustrated you and I got that the Pacers weren't outfoxing them, it's because the Pacers have played this Thunder team incredibly close, and this Thunder defense makes the Knicks defense look like child's play. Like, it's that much higher a level, and it's just they were dog tired at the end, and sometimes you lose games like that. This was the genesis of Pascal and the interaction he had. Is like, no, sometimes you get outplayed. Sometimes you're tired as hell. Sometimes that's the way that the game goes. And unfortunately for the Pacers, who've been fighting like hell in this series, you could see the fatigue. The guards were wearing it. And obviously Pascal didn't play the full fourth quarter because there was a fear that he would be wearing it at the end too if he were to play the full thing, after he and TJ were basically the only guys who could consistently create the paint to great touches that you talk about and that the Pacers talk about. It's fatigue, man. It's tough.
The only thing that I would say here is if they're seeing this again, and obviously Tony Bradley was back in the rotation after he really hadn't been, they
Hmm.
were matching his minutes with Hartenstein as much as they could, is that this is a really clear opportunity. I mean, the number one thing that you're going to do to counter an under is to rescreen.
Yeah.
You're already over there, like, don't release, set another pick so that Andrew can try to go off to his right, because there's no way to sneak that pass around with Hartenstein in front of Tony Bradley, and he'd already aborted his dribble. And like that continues to be somewhat of a recurring trend where it seems like they're killing their dribble a lot sooner in situations than they really need to be.
That's what pressure does.
Yeah.
Pressure, like, because you're looking for the release valve as the player, and so even if, because you hate having all that pressure, especially that OKC pressure, it's historic pressure. As soon as you see a sliver of like a pass out that might create a slight advantage, you pick up the ball to move it on. But OKC is also so good at recovering out to that sliver of an advantage you thought you had, blanketing that. And then also, once that disappears as well, once your dribble is killed, they're on you. And it's just like, that's why this defense is so impressive, historic.
Somebody who wasn't killing their dribble a lot, TJ McConnell.
Hell yeah, TJ.
That
was the best TJ ball we've ever seen, maybe.
Like, dramatic difference from what was it, game 1 TJ ball or game 2 TJ ball? The games are running together, but TJ on like consecutive possessions in the third quarter, driving straight to his right as he likes to do against J-Dub to go to, turning what could be layups into jump shots in his very TJ McConnell style way, getting a lot of play out of snug pick and roll in the third quarter to get to that spot, and then moves and counter moves. They go to the snug pick and roll again, and J-Dub anticipates that TJ will go to the right jumper as he has so many times, and TJ hits him with the spin and is able to get back in the opposite direction. And then I really like this. I wanted to give some credit to Benedict Mathurin because, as I pointed out many times, the Pacers run 1-4 flat for TJ literally at the end of almost every first and third quarter. If you watch Ben on this approach, I thought it was clever from him, especially with how good the Thunder defense is, that he late pivots right at the point of the screen so that in order to switch, they're going to have to do so with the ball moving in the opposite direction. And then for TJ to be able to split effectively what was going to be that switch and still get into the paint with his push dribble, make that shot. Like, he got a paint touch on over, I think he got into the paint on over 30% of his touches, if I have that number there. Yeah, 32.3% of his touches, he was able to get into the paint. And that's the difference here, because you're talking about Andrew. Like, obviously, Andrew's the primary defender on Shea for this entire series. And he and Tyrese combined for 5 turnovers in the fourth quarter. And when we're talking about that slot-to-slot pitch, like, it's very imperative. This is a very, easy assembly, basically no assembly required play to get Siakam a touch. That being said, you have to attack at a north-south angle. You actually have to draw Pascal's defender onto the drive to collapse somewhat so that will be open, and he's just automatically getting off the ball. And you can tell the difference in other games when they've run this. Like, it's called Omaha. They typically run it with Ben, but they'll do it with Siakam too. Like, look at the difference there, how much deeper he gets into the paint on the north-south angle. And then when he gets off the ball, he's actually screening Julius Randle so that Siakam can get downhill. Similar, you can see it with TJ against Dallas. You have to take, again, the north-south attacking angle so that the other defender actually has to somewhat commit. That's very different than what we saw there. And then this is just the under again, where I was hoping. That's another one of the turnovers where I was hoping that Tony Bradley
this playback. It kills me,
would set a rescreen. And then in this case, I want to know your opinion on this. So Andrew gets the ball, is driving at the top of the key. What are you hoping for here from the Pacers as far as a read, based on the OKC defense right there?
Just because of the help, and I know that they're going to come, and I know how hard it is to pass. I would have liked an attempt at a Gortat screen from Miles.
Let me run it back a little bit.
Like, I think there may have been an opportunity there, but again, this is just like watching.
Like a seal screen there.
Yeah.
Like a seal screen on J-Dub there.
Yeah. But obviously, like, he's trying to create space for dunker spot stuff. And that puts, the weak side into that zone situation. But the Thunder are so damn good. I mean, we'll see. He jumps it. So I would have liked to see them try.
What I was hoping for is that, like, you make a good point with the Gortat, but I was hoping that Miles would be a little bit better with his ability to move in relation to when the ball moves and
Hmm.
floating in space in the dunker spot. Because, I mean, typically what you're reading on the crackback rotation is whether that defender who's the helper for people who are listening, that's coming off of Aaron and sinking into Miles is where their shoulder is. If his shoulder is still on the outside and able to get to Aaron, then you're going to want to throw it to Miles. If it's pinned on the inside, then throw it to Aaron because they're not going to be able to get back out. In this case, it would be to Miles, but there's already multiple OKC defenders. So what I would have liked to see is like Miles sliding towards Caruso into the open spot as Andrew's driving. Force Caruso to make a choice between Miles and Obi Toppin because that's the shortest and easiest pass rather than having to pass through, once again, like the oscillating fan arms
Yeah.
of the OKC defense. Similarly here, like sometimes it feels like to me, because we talked about this on the last one with Miles too, that there's opportunities for like quick swim moves from some of the bigs. And they're too often the bigs locating up to the top of the key. Like this is really cluttered with Miles setting like a random flare, but like you have Siakam right there with Caruso, and yet they're having him, go up to the top of the key to try to clear space when I think that given Tyrese's injury, like that would have been a clearer advantage. And then this is just kind of like another example of me not understanding sometimes, like, and again, this is Tyrese, it's not somebody else. Like, I don't really know why you need to kill your dribble right here. Like, there's just been a lot of cases where they don't even necessarily have somebody up pressuring the ball, and I'm like, why are you picking up the dribble
Well,
that high
the
into
thing
the?
is with Tyrese, he gets the jump so often, like these Thunder guys, they don't jump to contest the jumper. Like they'll jump and stick to your hip. And that's different. And Tyrese is a very feared jump shooter. He spent basically his whole life probably taking that, collecting his dribble, going into that position and getting a big, heavy contest and then stepping through and trusting his ability to, find the open man. Maybe he's had give and goes and stuff out of that. And the Thunder are against type. I mean, we talked about this coming into the series, in our personal conversations, and then for public consumption is like the Thunder prey on a lot of what the Pacers need to do well in, and a lot of what Tyrese does well in. And I think this is just like a proclivities thing. Like I think Tyrese has had success with that a bunch of times, and it's just different against the Thunder. And he's injured. I mean, there you go.
The thing with TJ, which I didn't mention here while we were discussing him, is that he came out in the fourth quarter, didn't return until 3:23 left in the game. Came in for Nemhard. The Pacers were down 14 at that point. Siakam similarly came out for a brief stretch, and things just went to heck during those
To
few minutes.
heck. Oh my gosh. Don't say heck. You'll get in trouble with gosh.
It didn't go well while he went to the bench for those brief period of time. And you and I have talked about both of these things, and this was something that was a concern of mine in the series against Milwaukee because of everything that was being asked of Siakam in terms of him having to guard Giannis, what they were going to need from him offensively. And in one of my mailbags, we watched a game against the Dallas Mavericks in which Pascal Siakam played the entire fourth quarter and really struggled to defend in isolations while they needed to go smaller with him at the 5. This is a very real concern that the Pacers have witnessed, that like Siakam gets asked to do a ton for the Indiana Pacers on both ends of the court. Like, was it realistic to think that he was going to be able to play the entire fourth quarter? I don't know. It's similar with TJ. Like, TJ generally is at his best when he can play like 6-minute bursts because he plays, for lack of better terms, so hard, full throttle, and every minute that he plays that there can be diminishing returns when you play him too many minutes in a row. That being said, given how Nemhard was looking on somewhat both ends of the floor, given that Tyrese was limited, would you have liked to see them chance it with both of them and just be like, let's see what happens, and if they run out of gas, I guess they do.
Yes. But I wasn't asked. Well, actually during the game, I was like, I would have liked to see Pascal stay in. So that's probably, although I'll never be an NBA coach. If I was one, that's what I would have advocated for. I would like to see it. But again, like, Pascal has gotten really good at conserving energy in as many ways as he can and trying to stick in and be like, okay, so I have it for this and I can do that. But he's in the finals and like he's averaging like 3.5 stocks Shout out to your sister, stocks. 3.5 stocks per game. He's giving you a lot offensively. His usage is going up. The Thunder, he has to create a lot of times from above the break. Just what Pascal's being asked to do as a forward is not like, because Pascal gets paid the max, but what's currently on his plate is typically what's reserved for like super max players. He's giving you like all that stuff. He's giving you all defense performances. He's taking on more and more of the offense and doing so with these predatory piranhas, just oscillating fan piranhas, all this kind of stuff. It's tough to imagine, even as he was playing so good, that like you get 12 minutes of that. But also it's like, if ever there was a game, it would be that one. But again, like if I'm looking at, Coach Rick, I'm seeing a guy who's pulled the right lever so many times that it's like I swoop in and say, I would have played the really good player a little more. Like, wow, maybe you do, maybe you don't.
For background, in case people didn't get our inside joke there, when Samson and I were at media for Game 4, Samson had published his piece, and my sister was the person actually publishing the piece. And she got it in her head that she needed to proofread this article. And she doesn't come from a basketball background, despite being around my dad and I our whole lives. So she didn't know that stocks was the term for steals and blocks. So she was looking up in a frantic way whether he had 5 steals or 5 blocks, trying to fix something that didn't need to be fixed. So thank you, sister who wishes to remain anonymous, for the artwork that you contribute, but perhaps don't try to proofread the stats from now on. But
she's probably trying to save me from another beehive hive.
And yet she didn't correct that one. She didn't correct that one in the first sentence, but she had to track down the origin of stocks.
I think that's like a happy thing to me. I like that. Because really, it doesn't actually matter. It's just a funny little thing.
Further information on Pascal Siakam, because I do want to give some more time and space to what he was doing, especially at the beginning of the fourth quarter. In case people don't know by the numbers, which I have looked up and know what they are. Over the first 4 minutes and 11 seconds of the fourth quarter, Pascal Siakam had 12 points, going 4-4 from the field, scoring in a variety of ways: 2 rebounds, 1 block, 1 steal. And here's what we were looking at the time. So I don't have all of the scores here, but just to look at that one with Tyrese coming off the stagger again, because I think it's informative of everything. Like I said, like a lot is being heaped on Pascal's shoulders and is going to be heaped on his shoulders again in Game 6, depending upon what Tyrese's status here. Tyrese trying to pull and tug at the defense by just coming off that stagger and standing at the logo. Siakam's effectively having to create and manufacture points out of 4-on-4 spacing all by himself. And this is what's being asked of him a lot in the second half. And then he's having to rotate off of Lu Dort and making plays like this defensively. He's been tremendous as a help defender in this series. Like really, really strong defense that he's playing off of Caruso and Lu Dort at times, despite the fact that the two of them have shot the ball decently in the series. I don't know what they're shooting from 3, because I admit I did not look that up. But the types of communication that Siakam's been showing as the low man, which I was going to do as a clip package after one of these games, but then I felt like we had other things to talk about, has been really, really strong from him, even more so, I think, than from the regular season or really any round of these series from what we've seen to this point. But when he does come out, just keep in mind everything that he was just being asked to do offensively and defensively. When he does come out, Jalen Williams scores as a driver in 3 different ways over that period of time. So they're running stack with Jalen Williams. Aaron Nesmith still his primary. Nembhard still Shea's primary. He uses that spin move to get Aaron, peeling off of him. Andrew has to switch, because typically how the Pacers guard stack is with the guards switching guard to guard and then dropping the big around. Andrew has, as try as he might, Jalen Williams using that long step to hit the bank shot. So that's the first way that he scored as a driver. Out of stack action, pick and roll. And then I will ask you your opinion before we look at this way that Jalen Williams scored out of this one. Do you like what Andrew Nembhard's doing here as a help defender?
Yes.
So you like him sinking over there at the nail towards Shea with Aaron in front of Shea? Explain
I
the
like
thought process.
showing the bodies, and J-Dub hasn't been like incredible as a catch and shoot, as a spot up guy, and that's kind of
But
my
he's been
thought process.
pretty good at driving into rotation.
Yeah, I guess I would trust, like, once Shea is backpedaling, I would trust Andrew, if you can, on the large majority, to like erase, like, you stopped the straight line. Now once Shea is backpedaling, the defense as a whole is tuned into it, and you can kind of like move over a little bit closer to J-Dub, is probably my ideal way to play that.
The
But
sirens we're listening to is what's going on in my head when I'm seeing it.
let me hit mute and tell me what you think. Oh, wait, by the way, so Dort is shooting 58% from downtown in the finals, and Caruso is 42%.
Yeah. So, I mean, they're hitting the open shots, but I still like the way that they're using Siakam as a help defender. And I think it's probably the only trade-off you're going to come to, honestly. But so my thought process is, like, you got to be a little bit more intuitive with whether the person with Shea is actually getting beat or not. Like, you're not totally beat here. And if you're going to double, then to me, it's like, actually double it. Because if you're going to force him to get the ball out of his hands anyways, at least if it's a hard double, you might at least force a turnover. This is like kind of a passive help where you're at the nail, but you're just kind of in between and you're not really doing anything. And then you're just giving up middle penetration with him as a driver again anyways. Like, and especially because in this scenario, like with where Pascal and Miles are, do you really need Andrew providing that amount of heavy help there in that situation? Like, I mean, even if Aaron gets beat, Miles is going to be under the basket. Like, to me, that's making it really easy for him to be able to drive right into rotation. But perhaps I think that they're probably going to have to relax the help in one place or the other. The more I look through some of this, but the main point of this was Jalen Williams scored as a driver out of stack. He scored as a driver out of a closeout situation, and now he's scoring basically as a driver in isolation with that step back pull up over Aaron as well. So they did reach a point in the fourth quarter where Siakam came back in, and they were like, you know what, Andrews doesn't really have it in this fourth quarter right now. We're going to go back to the hot hand, which was TJ McConnell in the third quarter. They put TJ in, and the problem is, which, as we just saw, it wasn't as if the Pacers were really stopping Shea and Jalen Williams anyways, but the matchups are going to start getting really sticky here because you don't have any other choice with the five people who are on the floor, which is Tyrese, who's limited, Obi Toppin, who you're never going to put on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Aaron, who just fouled out of the last game because he kept getting switched onto Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and TJ is way too small to guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So now they have to go to Pascal. So the very first possession that TJ comes back in on, Pascal's guarding Shai, which it turns out, like, at least this is a three-point shot. Like, he doesn't beat him straight off on a straight line drive, as the two of them did, in several situations throughout this game against various defenders. But they didn't get the rebound, and then he gets it back, and now he is going to beat Pascal right to the rim for the left-hand layup.
That's so tough, by the way. It's an incredible finish.
But the Pacers, they don't want to chance it again. So Pascal was not on Shai on the very next possession. So they went ahead and they're like, you know what, we'll just go ahead and chance that Aaron might foul him. So then they put Aaron on him. And because Pascal is now back on Chet, and Obi is on Caruso, and Tyrese is on Dort, TJ is on Jalen Williams, who he's going to be giving up a ton of size to. And they're back to, sinking in and providing help off of Jalen Williams again, which in this case, he doesn't drive it and get middle penetration. And as to your point, he didn't make the catch and shoot three. But I don't
also,
think they're going
to defend my stance earlier,
mm-hmm.
I am worried about Nesmith on SGA is like motivating that. That's worrisome for me in this series. And I understand what you, in the best scenario that I'm pitching, it is a more intuitive understanding from Nembhard, although the clip we got was not a good one.
So I guess my point being is, I don't know that they'll be in the exact same scenario again in game 6 where they'll be like, we need to close with TJ. But, it does create an interesting conundrum here because, to be honest, they're not stopping Jalen Williams in the least. And Aaron has been his primary matchup. He's the only he's guarded him for 138 matchups. The only person who's guarded him for over 50 is Mathurin, which has been somewhat of a mixed bag. So they don't have a lot of options there. And so I ask you, which I won't show this last clip yet. We'll just go to talking here. would you make any adjustment on who's guarding Jalen Williams in Game 6? Are you still going to have that be Aaron despite what we're witnessing here?
Well, the interesting question is kind of where you said, like, they probably have to relax the help somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And we did bring up that Dort is shooting 58% and Caruso is shooting 42%. Aaron Wiggins has hit a couple over Pascal as well. He would be shooting, I think, over 50, just based going back to my memory bank. He's been banging triples with regularity, although not as many wide open ones as the former that we mentioned. There's a possibility that Pascal slides and you try and think of it more so as like, we're going to try and provide more stuff at the front. And Pascal on J-Dub could be something. Now, we're just talking about how much he gets asked to do.
Exactly.
and then you're going to say, the guy who gave us 40, we need you to go guard that guy now.
I know.
I don't know.
That's why it's crazy. That's why I sent you I sent you all the matchup numbers, didn't I?
Yes, at the bottom, I think.
Yeah, that's why I really can't make a decision here, because the internet has been calling for Pascal to be guarding J-Dub for like 3 games now. And I understand what they're witnessing with Aaron on J-Dub, but at the same time, like, there's a reason why Pascal's only done this for 12 half-court matchups, because of what we showed at the beginning of that clip package. Like, if Tyrese continues to be guarded in the way that Tyrese is being guarded, and if Tyrese continues to be limited, you are basically telling Pascal Siakam, like, dude, we need you to be creating 4-on-4 against, like, again, there's weak links out there for the Oklahoma City Thunder where this is just like, it's not the same thing as when you were like, hey, go do this against Karl Anthony Towns. Like, it's not super comparable to the prior rounds that we watched here. Or when it was like, hey, when he wasn't being guarded by Dean Wade, doing this against various other Cavalier players, or when Evan Mobley wasn't even guarding him at times. Like, this isn't the same ask. So if you're asking that much of him offensively, can you really expect him to be doing that against Jalen Williams too? I mean, I guess they kind of did that against Milwaukee to an extent, though at a more muted level. But to me, that's really the only matchup switch they could make, is like being like, okay, Aaron, you're just going to start guarding Lou Dort, and Pascal, you're going to have to guard Jalen Williams, because I don't really know who else you're going to switch over there and try. Yeah. But unless... I don't think it's, the other reason I don't think it's super viable, which we can toss this back and forth too, is that part of the reason why Shea's being able to maintain what he's doing at the end of games is because Jalen Williams is handling the ball so much. Like, he had 26 possessions as the bring-up ball handler in Game 5. He averaged 22.9 during the regular season. That was even higher when you and I were at Game 4. He had, like, I think his second highest time of possession in Game 4. It was still very high in Game 5, higher than the regular season. So if he's bringing the ball up and the Pacers still want to be applying full court pressure against them in the way that they are, and they still want to be going over on all the screens in the way that they are, when J-Dub runs a lot of pick and roll for the Thunder, then what do you think about Pascal guarding him?
You got to get ready to learn unders. You know what I mean?
Well, you either have to be really willing to embrace the unders, or you're going to have to say, like, to me, you'd have to be like, we're not going to keep applying the full court pressure against Jalen Williams. Like, we'll still keep doing it with Andrew against Shea, and hope that they're funneling some of the ball handling reps to Jalen Williams in the way that they have been. But I think you're going to have to dial it back, like what they did against Giannis, because that's what they did with Pascal against Giannis. They're like, when he's the bring up ball handler, we're not going to have you pressure 94 feet. That might be an option, but I don't know that they're going to want to relent on that, given what their identity is as a defensive team.
It really depends on, like, so J-Dub has been taking these long runways, and he's been brilliant with them.
Yep.
You can radically alter and change what he's working with. You know what I mean? He's averaging like 26, 6, and 4 in this series, roughly. He's shooting 31% from downtown. The pull-up 3 and the long pull-up, you can change it from him having to, like, outskirt help defense at the rim with these incredible scoop layups and touch, and you can make it more so like him constantly deciding, is this my shot? You know, or do I? And that's what the Pascal swap can do, is you can allow Pascal to clutter things up front, and you can really change how J-Dub tries to solve. Because J-Dub, the last 2 games, I mean, hell yeah, dude, he's been unbelievable. Like, he's arrived. Jackson Frank said he's top 20 player. He's playing like top 10 in this series. You know what I mean? He's been unbelievable. And changing his calculus, it might work for a game. I don't know if it would work for two, but there's also if Tyrese isn't going to play, then there's the Matherin. It's just like, I don't really know. It's tough, very tough.
Well, because the other trade-off is if you're like, you know what, that's what we're gonna do. We gotta try something else against Jalen Williams. It's gonna be Pascal. Maybe we toy around with how we're utilizing the pressure. If it is Pascal, to try to preserve him because we know how important he is offensively. You're losing Pascal in the things that I just said that he's been very good at, and that you're not gonna have him as the helper anymore. You're not gonna have him communicating as the low man anymore. And I don't know how I feel about Aaron Nesmith in that role.
Is definitely not going to be as good. But it's relying on, it's like lowering the drives. It's just like that Nesmith, yes, he's in that role, but he's not in it as often.
Yeah, and then that's the thing. It's like if you dial back the pressure, you mix in some unders and Pascal's at J-Dub, then maybe you're not engaging the low man as often, and maybe you're not giving up as many threes to Ludort and Caruso because Aaron's role is slightly different. Mm-hmm. Definitely a trade-off. But I mean, here's the possession that I think is that we can look at specifically with this. So when I'm talking about, you're going to have to toy around with which person is helping. This is kind of it. Like, Nembhard's guarding Shea coming off that pick from Chet. Do you need both Aaron at the nail off of J-Dub, one pass away, and Pascal just outside the restricted area off of Ludort? To me, it's one or the other of those two people. Either you're basically in a passive next with Aaron and Pascal's out of the paint, or Pascal's being active roamer. We don't care what we give up to Ludort and Alex Caruso. Like, if we get more than we bargained for, we do. And Aaron's taking a step closer back to Jalen Williams. Like, I don't think that this should continue to be both people.
Yeah. Obviously, they want, like, the pickup, and that's why he's there. And then they want to protect against if the pickup does it. Like, if Shea is incredible and manages to split. Do you have a preference between the two?
If they're not going to put Pascal on Jalen Williams, then I prefer that Pascal is just being the cleaner, the sweeper behind him, and Aaron's not playing this far off. Because as we said, the Thunder have been very comfortable playing best versus best, and they're either doing that with Shea screening for Jalen Williams, which we'll get to because the Pacers actually did do better against that, or they're doing it just playing both of them one pass away from the other and just waiting for one. It's very simple offense. Like, the Thunder aren't doing a lot of really complicated things here. Like, this is just one pass away, put one star here, one star there, and then in that case he does make the catch and shoot three. So I feel like there's a tough series of decisions to be made here defensively, but I think that the defensive decisions are obviously going to matter quite a lot if they're not getting expected offensive production from Tyrese, which I'm having trouble seeing that.
Yeah. You just watch, like, like Pascal and TJ are the best players for the Pacers in game 5. And Shea and J-Dub are the best players for the Thunder in every game. But you watch how one side has to create and what it takes, and like the machinations of, like, how do we get these guys an advantage? What does it look like? And then the Thunder are like, yeah, we're just going to have a screen. And the Pacers are like, damn it, man, it's tough. It's very hard. And I mean, those guys have been so good. J-Dub, for a guy who has struggled in these playoffs, had pockets of just like, man, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm having trouble implementing myself. The back half of this series, what an arrival. He's just been unbelievable. And Shea is just incredible.
My other really lazy answer is, I was like, well, they might have to play more zone again.
Yeah. That's how you know, like, you're out of answers. And, like, it's why when the Pacers broke the Cavs zone, it was like, oh, it's so over, dude. Because throwing zone, not as like...
the Cavs did steal a game by playing a ton of zone.
They did. Do you think the Pacers already had that game, though?
You think they already stole their game?
Well, I'm saying, like, but they threw zone in game 3.
They're like 5 possessions.
A little bit of zone. How much zone would you
No,
like to
I just
see?
want to clarify that my problem with a little bit of zone is when they're talking about just a possession and they're like, oh, they're playing a little bit of zone.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? I don't know what it means. It either is a zone or it isn't a zone.
So, okay, so you want game 6, big zone game. If the Thunder go away laughing, hitting shots, that's the finals. But Tyrese Haliburton has a strained calf and you're trying to steal something here.
Yep.
You need to throw the junk.
Yep. That's how I feel.
It's not, I mean, that's not the worst situation these Pacers have been in.
I don't think you should leave anything on the table, especially, if I had insider knowledge to exactly what the extent of Tyrese's calf is, I might feel differently about some of these things, but I think that some tweaks need to be coming. Something's got to give.
Yeah, his calf is fine. They simply announced it for him to evade criticism from those talking heads who he's deeply concerned about.
Yep, they're just providing a built-in excuse. I'm sure that's what it was. But I will finish it up and say that for people who watched our prior podcast, Samson and I talked about this particular action for quite some time, with Shea screening for Jalen Williams as the ball handler, and then the Pacers switching that over and over again at the end of Game 4, and Aaron ultimately getting into foul trouble against Shea. Aaron's had the second highest foul rate of shooting fouls per 100 of the players in the playoffs who've played over 200 minutes. The only person with more has been Mitchell Robinson. And so this is what was going on at the end of Game 4. The two of us wondered, I don't think that you should probably continue to switch Aaron outright on to Shea again. Samson was like, I would probably go with a hedge and recover and a quick show. And lo and behold, that is what the Pacers did so that they could maintain Andrew on to Shea. They did this probably 2 or 3 possessions in the first half. The Thunder actually didn't go to it that much in the second half. This is just continuing with Pascal, that shot that we talked about earlier that Shea made over the top of Pascal after Pascal had switched. See, this is what makes me think you're going to have to play a little bit of zone. But another quick show from Andrew and then back on to Shea, so that they weren't getting the same option with Shea isolating against Aaron. So that actually was something that they did better. And to point out, I asked Samson at the time, would you be at all worried that Shea would slip out of these coverages and go to the nail? He slipped right back out to 3. He didn't go to the nail.
Do I get my flowers?
That's why I
do
picked
I
these
have
clips,
the big
Samson.
brain?
Look at what time I spent today to clip this together for you to highlight what you said. So they didn't adjust right away to what I think would have been an obvious counter for the Pacers, countering in that manner. And by the end of the game, they didn't actually do this that many times. So,
jeez, basketball understander, basketball knower, ball knower. Yeah. Thank you. That is one of the kindest things you've ever done for me. Is going to get the hedge and recover.
I feel like the list of kind things I've done over the last couple weeks has been fairly long, but
that's true. Ever grateful.
Eternally. Okay, well, this is the stuff that I came up with today while I was waiting to record this podcast. Which was probably a good thing that we waited to record it, because all of the events of the last week really caught up to me, and I was having a really hard time staying awake last night. I actually fell asleep with my laptop on my body. So,
yeah, I don't think I can fall asleep like that, because I'm always worried like the laptop would fall off. You know what I mean?
I would have been worried about it. I was completely beat. I had nothing left to give.
Yeah, you and Ty left it all on the floor last night.
Oh yeah, we had a hard one. Yeah.
Yeah. You're going to ask me if I have anything, and I'm going to say no. I interjected, as I usually do, and that's the truth of it.
If this podcast didn't live up to expectations, what should I put out there tomorrow as a reason why? What was my strain?
Brain strain.
Sleep deprivation.
Yeah. You just say you had a seizure. I got a day off work when I had a seizure.
No, you didn't. Don't you remember what happened that day?
Yeah, that's true.
We recorded a podcast.
Well,
I remember I texted you and I was like, "How do you feel about doing this? It's fine if you don't want to do it," because it was the day after American Thanksgiving, and you were like, "I would really like to podcast." It's like, okay, then that's what we will do.
a bastard's work is never done.
Never take any time off. No off days in the podcasting realm for Samson Folk.
That's yeah. Which
Spends his vacation podcasting, spends his days after having a seizure podcasting.
Yeah, I spent my seizure podcasting even. I was mid-seizure and I was like, so that gotta get half court possession. That's a crazy video. Did you see the video?
I saw it, yeah, because afterwards I was going to be talking to you about the podcast, and I was very worried because in the live chat there was just people being like, "Is Samson okay?" And I was like, "What happened?" I was very upset and worried.
Yeah, I understand why people would be upset and worried because I didn't experience it. I was just like, from my perspective, the seizure was like, I'm just going to take the smallest little, close my eyes. And then I was talking really slow. And then I was looking at the chat and I saw, whoa, what's everyone talking about? And then I said, okay, bye, everyone. And then I looked around and everybody was like, what the hell just happened? And then Blake messaged me and I was, because I actually went to talk to students. I was at a university, and then I was like, hey, so what happened? And I watched it back and I was like, oh, that's weird. Then I went to Blake's. I had a Gatorade and like a power bar. And then I went off to the hospital. Hell of a time.
Because I was doing Blake's pregame show the next morning, and I asked him how you were doing because I was like, I don't really know what to do. Should I offer doing this podcast, or should I just tell him I'm not doing it and you need to rest? And Blake was like, he might need an intervention. And I was like, but maybe he wants to podcast. I don't know what he wants to do.
Yeah, I wanted to podcast. But
so podcasting we did.
Yeah.
That was a fun trip down memory lane.
Yeah. It was weird.
What I spent my time doing was reading War and Peace. As people normally would. That was my way to prevent myself from doom scrolling. That is the wonder of books. You can't hold a phone while you're reading a book.
Probably could.
No, you can't. Like when you're watching TV or you're doing other stuff, like you naturally will be like, I'll look at my phone. When you're holding a book and you're reading it, like I'm not going to be looking at my phone while I'm reading.
That's why, and I tweeted this out, at the behest of my friend. I was like, our audiobooks reading. You know what I mean? And of course, like, every conversation you have about that devolved into some people were saying like, well, this is ableist because some people can't read and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, okay, well, from that point of view, I hate to say this, but like the conversation isn't regarding that. It's for people who are able to engage with it as we understand it. And for anybody who has like an exception, then exceptions are given. That's a good society would do as much. But, it was like there were a couple people who say they work in like child development and stuff like that, and how some people think that the brain responds to reading differently than you take in stuff differently, and it's also like a muscle of attention span that you have to give, and it's all these different things. I've never listened to an audiobook in my life yet.
I've never either.
Lewis reads a ton. He's a voracious reader and a voracious audiobook listener. But I just love reading. But if you love audiobooks, I mean, hell yeah. I mean, you're listening to a podcast right now. Hello.
I've actually never listened to an audiobook either. I did have, when I was in school, people are just going to think I spend all my time being sick. I don't, people. I went like 5 years without being sick. But I was in high school. I got sick for like 2 weeks. And my sister was helping me do my homework. And she read, it's a play. Our Town. Oh. That's it.
Yep. I didn't read Our Town.
Okay, she had to read it to me because I was like, I can't do it. You have to read it.
Wow.
I'll have to do
you had her read it to you like in the wow.
Yeah, we were back in like pioneer days reading it by candlelight.
Wow, it's like Princess Bride. He's like, Grandpa, can you read me a story? He's like, all right. He's like, you kissing? Ugh, gross. That's such a good movie. I love that movie. Have you seen it?
No.
Princess Bride. Oh my days. You need to watch that. For this is what I want people to comment about. If you've seen Princess Bride, I want in the comments telling Caitlin why she should watch it. It's very up your alley. I think you'd love it dearly.
How do you know what's up my movie alley?
Just I can make assumptions. I allow myself that, yes.
Well, in 5 years from now, perhaps I will watch it if I find the time.
Good. Agreed.
Okay, well, this was a fun and pleasant way, I think, to finish out this game, talking about seizures and audiobooks and the Princess Bride. Thanks to everybody for listening to this, despite the fact that we are once again somewhat delayed. But you still listened to the last one, despite the fact that we are delayed. So I think that means that you value the information that comes from this podcast, the camaraderie that comes from this podcast. And I don't think you're going to get that exact same thing if you go listen to a different one. It's not going to be the Caitlin and Samson podcast. So,
Yeah,
I think you probably should spend your time listening to this one ahead of Game 6.
I'll be honest with you. I don't think we should have any fear of someone encroaching on this podcast. Like some people, there will be there'll be overflow of like something cool happened, so there's more eyes. But as far as like if someone was like, well, I can just listen to this instead, there's no alternate to this podcast. It's this or it's nothing. So if you like it, this is the one. There's a reason people are like, I've been waiting for this, or I'll make time for this. It's a singular product because Caitlin enters sleep deprivation for it.
And I
because
also think, like genuinely, like for people who have talked about the pod, like my goal for this, which is why sometimes my transitions and other things probably don't sound as professional as you're hoping for, is I want it to sound like people are sitting here with us, two friends talking about basketball. So hopefully that's the way that it comes off.
I think so too. That's the best. That's the best environment. Well, also I'll say like my favorite podcast is, I told you this, but my favorite podcast is not exactly that. It's an extremely well-researched podcast. It's called Blowback. And Noah Colwyn followed me back on Twitter. He's a co-host on that podcast. And that is what came out of this championship run, this finals run. That's very meaningful to me. So whoever made it, actually, let's do this. Whoever made it, if this is your favorite podcast, tweet Princess Bride at me on Twitter and I'll follow you back.
Good one. I'm going to let you close it because I don't have a good segue for the closings, as people know.
Thunder fans who are listening, you should be really proud of your team. They've responded to like a million different things and your stars are balling the hell out. Pacers fans, you should be really proud of your team because they've been outskirting the most difficult things to outskirt. And I'll just say this. Somebody asked me this on Twitter, like, what was better, that Toronto Raptors 2019 defense or this Thunder defense? I just did a rewatch on the film of that Raptors defense. I hold it in like the highest regard. It's one of the best defenses I've ever seen. This Thunder defense is better. The fact that the Pacers have won 2, the fact that they're in it, and like they have to push the boulder up the hill with this Tyrese situation, especially. But this team should be beloved by Pacers fans for eternity. Like everyone should have like you'll talk about like the Ben Mathurin game. You'll talk about the TJ stretch. You'll talk about Ben Shepherd coming in and playing like defense for the extra Y. And of course, you'll obsess over Pascal and Tyrese constantly. It's just this has been such good basketball.
I'm not going to remember the Andrew Nembhard, Jalen Brunson defensive game.
Well, you will. As you well know, we've talked about Drew to no end, ad nauseum. I just hope everyone remembers why they're watching. Not about narrative or storyline or anything like that. Like you're just watching the best players in the world.
You mean I shouldn't think that Tyrese is a bum and Rick's a terrible coach based off of Game 6 or Game 5 of this series?
me personally, that wouldn't be my takeaway. Glory to the winners, respect to the losers is like a decent thing to operate on. But yeah, that's where I'm at. And since I'm closing it out, thanks for being where we're at, listener. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. It helps out everything we're doing here. This podcast will continue to exist even past this playoffs run. So if you want to stick around with us and keep learning about stuff, about the NBA at large, with two people that you like, hopefully, subscribing, commenting, liking, all that kind of stuff, it helps us out. And if you want to go even further, Caitlin has a Patreon. It is what supports us. It's what allowed me to go to Indianapolis to cover. Like a dream of mine in my career happened because of Caitlin and because of the people who pay Caitlin for her work, and by proxy, me, by extension, me, I should say. So just thank you to everyone who has. And if you have a little bit of money burning a hole in your pocket, and it's not too much, feel free to support. We thank you very much. Whether you got into this in the morning or at night, have a blessed day and goodbye.